They didn't tell me I wasn't going to be able to turn my mic on and off once I had these gloves on. So let me get my gloves back on here for just a minute. Y'all go with me. We got the eye of the tiger. I mean, come on, feeling rocky on a Sunday morning. You might have to help me out. I need to call my corner over here. Help me out, get me on here. I had to unstrap and get back. This is what happens when you wear your 10-year-old's boxing gloves on a Sunday. All right, strap me tight on there. Hey, good morning, folks. Hey, today I want to present to you for just a couple of minutes how sometimes inside of relationships, it's a little bit more like a boxing match. Now, maybe not all the time, hopefully not all the time. I hope most of your relationships are like a playground. You get to have some fun, enjoy each other's company. But something happens when we get on the inside of communication and there starts looking like a little bit of conflict is about to come our way. Something happens, right? We start packing punches. We start throwing punches. Inside of our conflicts, inside of our relationships, what happens is we use the combos. We learn the jab. You know much about the jab in boxing? A jab has a distance factor to it. The jab is to kind of keep you at bay. It's to keep you away. It's to keep pushing you back. Sometimes what happens on the inside of our relationships is we have these little jabs. We have these little things. A lot of times they're subtle. They're little words that we use, little things that kind of push people back a little bit. Sometimes we have those, not just the jab, we have the straight. And when you come with a straight, what you're looking to do is to put your opponent off guard, to set them off of their feet. You're trying to land that blow that strikes and knocks them back a little bit, right? We do this on the inside of relationships. We do this with the hook. Have you thought about a hook before in relationship? A hook, the benefit of boxing is you have something that catches your opponent completely off guard. Now think about this for just a minute. You're in boxing, you've got your guard up, you've got your punches, right? The thing that you cannot see is when the hook comes, it catches you on the blind side. Sometimes hooks in relationship are words that are said to us. You couldn't have seen them coming from a mile away. You didn't expect them. And they land in a place that knocks you backwards, that takes your balance away from you, that sends you into stumbling on your feet. Now, there's one that we haven't covered yet, and that's the uppercut. Now, I don't know if any of you watched boxing back in the day, but I'm a 90s kid, and Mike Tyson was like the master of the uppercut. Any of you watched Mike Tyson back in the day? I mean, Iron Mike, Southpaw, dude had a left, and he could come with it and lay his opponents out. 19 years old, 19 seconds before the knockout in the ring, dude could throw a punch. Now, we have knockout blows on our relationships that feel a little bit like the uppercut. See, it's the combo move. We've got these jabs, we've got the straight, we've got the hook, and then what happens is as we're in relationship and conflict is going on and we find ourselves where we've got them backed up, we're pushing them where we want them, we're pushing them where we want them, there's feud, there's fight, we're throwing there's combos in there. What happens is they begin to tuck, they begin to lower their head, they're defeated just a little bit, and you see your moment, you see the kill, you see the knockout blow, you see them lean in, they're tucking in closer to you, and you find your uppercut spot, and sure enough, lands directly where you aimed and knocks them out. Fight is over. Round is over. Inside of our relationships, oftentimes we're in the ring. We're in conflict. There are things that happen. And the thing about being in the ring is you're kind of closed in. Like you're not going anywhere. I'm not going to get out of the relationship. I can't get out of the relationship if I wanted to. Sometimes the words that we're throwing, oh, it's with my wife. It's with your husband. Sometimes it's with family members. You're not getting out of the ring. What happens when we begin to throw punches on the inside of our relationships? Why do we wield our words as weapons? And what would it look like if we could somehow figure out how to maybe take the gloves off for just a bit? What would it look like for us instead of ending up in the position where through our relationships we end up like this, where we've been beaten up, where we've been bruised, where we're bleeding? What would it look like for us if we were to somehow take the gloves off and stop using our words as weapons. How would we do that? And so we've started a series last week. If you missed last week, I encourage you to go and watch part 1. But we're calling it Throwing Shade. Now, if you're not up with the urban lingo, it simply means this: throwing insults, denouncing, disrespecting, offending, using my words as weapons. And so what would it look like for us to begin to change the way we engage each other in communication? This is what we're talking about in the series. What does it look like for us to be able to reconcile relationship, tame the words a bit? So it turns out the Bible has a lot to say about the things that we say. And so I want to take you in a few places, starting with the book of Proverbs. Now, if you didn't know, the book of Proverbs has over 150 occurrences where it talks about our lips, our tongue, our mouth, the things that come out. Over 150 times. So I hope you brought lunch today, you packed a lunch, and you're ready, because we're going to cover them all. And I'm just going to give you a few of them. Here's the first one here in Proverbs 10, and it says to us, when words are many, sin is not absent. I mean, that's pretty true, isn't it? Listen, you don't even have to be a believer, a Christ follower, to agree with the statements that are going to come out of this. When words are many, sin is not absent. We have experienced this in our life. But he who holds his tongue is wise. Let's go to 13:3. It says, he who guards his lip guards his life. But he who speaks rashly will come to ruin. And there's this next verse, and it's got to be one of my favorite in all of Scripture, especially if like somebody's a real punk and they got a big mouth. This is one of my favorites. Check this out. A fool's lips bring him strife, but his mouth, you got a beating coming your way. You ever met somebody like that? Ran out of the mouth. I am not condoning violence at all. Do not email me. Don't call the church office tomorrow. I went to school not too far from here when we had a kid in our class. Oh my gosh. This guy had the smartest mouth of anybody. And the boy didn't have the frame to back it up. Like, listen, if you talk smack, you need to be able to back it up because somebody's going to call you on it eventually. Well, he talked smack to the wrong guy one day. Happens to be my cousin, Bo. He was bringing the strife on himself, and I watched this boy's head get caved in. This mouth that runs off can get you into trouble a little bit. It causes conflict. Proverbs lays it out very clearly. Like, listen, this thing can cause issues. It can cause strife. Now, hopefully, it doesn't land a bunch of knuckles right across your forehead. Hopefully, that's not the case. But man, there are a lot of things that hurt worse than knuckles across the forehead. There's some of the relationship pains that we walk through, some of the things that we encounter, some of the burdens that we walk through in our relationships. We've been beat up, we've been beat back, we're bruised, and we're bleeding. Now, sometimes we're the ones who are throwing the punches, and sometimes we're the one who's been punched. But I think in any regard, we've all been there at some point or another. Something comes out of your mouth, it lands in a way that maybe you didn't intend to, maybe you did. Maybe you meant to throw that right hook. We've all been on the receiving end of that. Maybe it was intended that way, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they meant to knock you back. Maybe they didn't. But the Bible has a lot to say about the things that we say. It talks a lot about the idea of words being powerful. We looked at that last week. That the power of life and death is in the tongue. You remember this from Proverbs 18, chapter 21. Power of life and death is in the tongue. That these words, they can change the trajectory of our lives. They can change the entire direction. Something someone said to you put you on a path, whether it was a parent, a guardian. They shaped who you are, what you believe in. Words are indeed powerful. And then you begin to look at the New Testament, you move out of Proverbs, and Jesus talks about our words as well. And then when Jesus talks, especially when you see your Bible in those red letters, you need to slow down and pay attention. Look at what he says about your words here. This is what he says. I tell you that the day of judgment, on the day of judgment, that people are going to do what? Oh no. People are going to give an account for every careless word that they speak. This is kind of dangerous for a guy who talks for a living, right? You run off at the mouth. He says every word that you speak, you're going to be accountable for, which means one day, on the day of judgment, I'm going to stand before God, and I think there's going to be some replays. I think some of the things that I've said, the way that I've used my words, it says that we're going to be accountable for what we do, what we say. And so for by your words, you're going to be Come on, help me out. For by your words you're going to be, and by your words you will be. And so there's something, this power of profession, this power of our words, the power of our faith. The words have power, and Jesus says that we're going to be accountable for them. Last week we looked at a place in James that's pretty famous, and it talks about the tension. It talks about the idea that we know these words are powerful. When we stop and we think about it and we're conscious of it, then yeah, maybe we put some filters, some barriers. But James told us there's a problem here. He said that out of that same mouth, you come in here and you do this and you sing, "Kumbaya, my Lord, I love you, Jesus." And then we have something that happens on the other side of it. I'm cursing the same creation that God died for. And that becomes problematic. In fact, this should not be. And so James begins to lay out that argument, and we know these things, whether you've been offended or whether you're doing the offending, but how and why? How is it that in our closest relationships, that sometimes we treat them worse, we beat them back, we throw the biggest punches at those that we love and are closest to us? We're willing to say some things in the context of relationships that we're familiar with that I wouldn't say to a stranger in the street. It packs a bigger punch, depending on what is said, but who is indeed saying it. And so how do we know what to do? What is it that causes the issues? And I think James, the brother of Jesus, he says, well, I'm so glad that you asked. He says, what causes quarrels and fights amongst you? Yeah, what causes the issues? And you're sitting in the seats right now, and I know what you're thinking. It's, hey, pick me. I got it. Pick me, pick me. I know. I don't need a counselor. I don't need you, preacher. I don't need James, the brother of Jesus, to come in here and tell me what causes the quarrels and the fights. I can tell you because I know the answer. You know the answer too. It's every other individual. I know what causes the fights. It's my boss. If he would stop being a jerk, he'd stop acting that way, I wouldn't have an issue with him. I know what causes the issues. It's not me. Let's just be clear. It is not me. It ain't me. It's my daddy. I know what the issue is. It's that man I married. We start to think we know the answer to the question that James is going to present before he ever begins to even unpack it. And he says, whoa, slow down a little bit. Don't assume you got this whole thing figured out yet. James is going to say, no. I think I need to clue you in on something. Maybe there's something that you could learn that you haven't learned yet. James is going to begin to unpack it. What causes these things? Is it not this? Your passions are at war within you. Now, this is like one of those moments where it should be like the ding, ding, come back to your corner, please. We need to have our conversation. Take the gloves off for just a minute. Come back over here. Let's talk about this issue. James is telling you what is at the center of your conflict and your most important relationships. I value those relationships so much that when I see something like this, I lean in really close. Even if I don't believe the fullness of the Bible, in this moment, I'm leaning in really close. Which, by the way, I believe the fullness of the Bible. Maybe you don't. Let me clarify that. These passions, right? I don't want more emails. That's what happens, Ryan. I get emailed. What causes quarrels? What causes these? These passions, these things are at war within you. There is conflict about what's going on. And so what I want to do is I want to take this few moments and I want to begin to unpack this. I want to walk through this. I want to talk about the passions. I want to talk about these tensions that war within you. And I just want to say that these concepts, they apply all the way from the boardroom to the bedroom. The concepts that he's talking about here, the place where we find tension, the place where you are wanting to throw, these kind of things, the things that James is going to lay out, the solution that he's going to give us. Like last week, he set you up and then he dropped the mic and he walked out. But in this place, he's going to begin to give you solution to the challenges that we face on the inside of communication. So if you don't know, James is the brother of Jesus. He becomes one of the first pastors. He starts pastoring a church in Jerusalem. And so he starts writing this letter. There's some conflict that's going on within a church, within a community, within relationships. And James starts writing this letter. He says, what does it cause? What makes all of that stuff happen? And then he goes on and says, it's your passions at war within you. And then in verse 2, he says this, that you desire, this is an important word, you desire, yet what? Yet you do not have. You desire, but you don't have, and so you murder, you covet, and cannot attain, and so you fight and you quarrel. Now, this is a really big deal because he's talking about this idea that you have desires, right, on the inside of you, and yet they're not being fulfilled. Now, that's a condition that every one of us experience in life. Disappointment was something we talked about recently. This is something here that every one of us have desires, and then he begins to use this word covet. That every one of us have things that we long for, that we want to have, that we believe that we deserve, and then those things are what we aim our lives at. And he says you desire to have these things, you long to have them, but you don't have them, and so it's creating a problem for you, and you are willing to go to the worst extremes possible, not just punching somebody, but taking them out. Again, I hope that this is not the case, that we go to these extremes, but we would be willing to put to death even the most intimate of relationships, sacrificing those things because of desires within us. And you say, no, I wouldn't. And yes, you do. When conflict begins to happen and you're pushing, and you're throwing shade, what's happening is there's something on the inside of you, your passions are at war, there's a desire that you do not have. And this, my friends, becomes the key to conflict and the communication. What happens right in this window. Something is going on. See, each of us come into a relationship and we have hopes, and we have dreams, we have desires. You enter into this relationship, again, whether it's a professional relationship, whether it's the person that you married, you entered into that relationship on a few premises, on what things could be, on what you desire for them to be, what they should be, and what you expect them to be. And what happens is we now have this place of expectation within us. And expectation is a really powerful concept on the inside of your relationships. And you may not even be clear of what your expectations are. That we enter into relationship, and now, because of my past, the things that I want, the desires that I have, the passions that I have, I'm now entering into relationship. I have expectations, and chances are I haven't even made them known to you yet, that they're unspoken expectations. And you'll see what I mean. I expect you to agree with all that I say and feel is best and right, and I want you to make it happen. This is what happens inside of our unspoken expectations. That oftentimes we enter into relationship. I do marriage counseling. I sit with married folks. I can't tell you how many people dreamed of the day that they would get married, and it was everything that they longed for and everything that they desired and all of their passions, and they brought all of this stuff. Well, guess what? There was an entire other party that you married. And their hopes and their dreams and their desires and their expectations, they weren't exactly the same. No matter how much you fell in love and it was all, rainbows and sunshine, and all of us bring those things into relationship. We have expectations. It's not wrong to have expectations, but oftentimes what happens is they're unspoken. I expect you to know them. I expect you to agree with them. And then those unknown expectations is sometimes they're just unrealistic expectations. Things that you want, you like, you desire. Unrealistic expectations on the relationship. And here's what happens. Whether it's unspoken or whether you move into the place of unrealistic expectation, you wait a period of time and it becomes unmet expectation. And this is really powerful too. You have expectations on the inside of you, and when those expectations are not met by the person that you moved into a relationship with, you begin to experience disappointment, and you begin to experience frustration. Unmet expectations become frustration, And then frustration becomes what? Becomes fights. It becomes feuds. Isn't this what James is saying to us? That your passions are at war within you? That your desire, but you do not have? There's an expectation. It's not being met. It's an unfulfilled, it's an unmet expectation. And now there's tension on the inside, and our relationships are struggling because of it. And it becomes a family feud. And so you guys have heard about the idea of fight or flight before, right? You've heard fight or flight. You've probably taught this in grade school. You probably learned this about the animal kingdom. We have something in this similar, the way that we respond to conflict. How many of you would say, if you're given two options, fight or flight, that fight would be the first instinct, that you're not backing away from conflict, that you're going to meet it head on, you're comfortable with it, you can hold your own? I don't mean physically, I mean argumentatively. How many of you would say that versus the other side is how many would say flight, right? Fight or flight. I prefer to not be in conflict. I'm more of a peacemaker. I look for resolutions, or I just try to avoid conflict. I avoid conflict. Which of you say I have no challenges with conflict? Maybe I'm wording this wrong. You're not going to want to admit to either one of these, are you? How many of you are the first one? Conflict is like, okay, I get it. I don't want conflict, but I know how to navigate conflict. I've been in conflict, right? How many of you are like, hey, I prefer, my natural propensity is like, I want to avoid conflict. How many of you are that way? Yeah. I see this difference in my children too. One of the things I think is neat is it's not just fight or flight. Like those were the options that maybe you were given, but it's so far from that. There's so many other ways that we respond to being pushed back by punches, or whether you're the one throwing the punches. A lot of this stuff depends on your temperament. Like it depends on your hardwiring, the way that God made you. And so I'm just going to make a shameless plug here for just a second, going back to the next level piece of this. What we need to understand is the way that we're wired and the way that we deal with communication oftentimes comes out of temperament. And so if you haven't gone through next level yet, the reason we stress this is because some of you are red, some of you are blue, yellow, green, or a combination of them. Some of you are red, and maybe you're the one who can run right through conflict, and you're very driven, even if that means burning somebody or throwing punches along the way. Some of you are more in the yellow, you're the life of the party, and you go really insecure when conflict starts happening. Why don't they like me? Is something wrong with me? What's going on? Some of you are in the blue. You're going to analyze every single word that has been said, and you're going to camp out on every word, and you're going to pull out the dictionary and look up the meaning of every one, even if the person who said it doesn't know what it meant. That's you, blue, right? And then some of us are in the green. You're the peacemakers. You're the one who's loyal. You're the one who's trying to find solution for everybody that's in the middle of the chaos. My point in bringing this up is I want you to come and find out, because we use this as common language all the time here. What color are you? Know your color. It helps with how we serve together. It helps with how we deal with relationship with each other. It helps me know how to engage my wife. It helps me with each of my children. It gives me a framework for how to navigate relationships and conversation within them. If you're not signed up, this is my last of the shameless plug, grab your app today, get in it, meet me here next weekend, okay? All right, that's it, end plug. All right, here we go. And so let's go back to James. We recognize the problem. We've all thrown some punches. We wish we had some takebacks. We've all had some punches thrown at us. So what then becomes the solution? How do we take the gloves off? And honestly, I think it's easier than what you imagine. When you find yourself in the height of conflict with each other, sometimes you get, how are we going to move forward? How are we going to get past this? This is really thick. This is really difficult. I think it's easier than you imagine. Here's what I've found to be true. More often than not, both parties, they want the same exact thing. Now, maybe not on the specifics. We may not agree on this one particular area, but both parties want the exact same thing. You know what it is? It's to be heard and to be understood. Both of you want the same exact thing. I want to be heard and I want to be understood. Have you ever been in an argument with someone where the volume just keeps rising? Do you know why? You're laughing. It sounds familiar, huh? The volume keeps rising because I want to be heard and you're not listening to me, and I'm trying to get what I've got to say over your volume level. We all want the same thing. We all want to be heard and we all want to be understood. I may not agree with you about the decisions that we're making at work, My wife and I may not agree on every single thing, like maybe what we're going to do with the kids or something like that. We may not agree with everything along the way, but I know this part. If we start engaging each other and tension begins to get risen and the hands begin to close off and the voice begins to elevate and, we're strapping up now. You ready to roll? Oh, girl, you ain't ready for that. I was going to have her up here sparring with me, but she'd beat me back with the... She got the kickboxing thing going. Watch out for that right leg coming at you. But what happens is we all want the same thing. We want to be heard and we want to be understood. And I really think this is similar to the principle of the golden rule, isn't it? Jesus was like, do unto others what you want him to do unto you. I'm in conflict with you. You know what I really want? I just want to know that you're listening a bit. I want to know that you're not so thick-headed, that you're going to keep cramming this down my throat, and that you won't take a moment and just listen a little bit and just begin to give a bit of understanding, right? And so James, brother of Jesus, he's going to build out this idea. I didn't get it. I didn't make it up myself. James is going to come lay this out. Watch this. James chapter 1, he says, my dear brothers and sisters, wake up. Pay attention. You need to get this. This is going to help you, right? He says, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to what? Quick to listen and... quick to listen and slow to speak. James, brother of Jesus, says, I've got the solution for you. Be quick to listen and be slow to speak. Slow to become angry. And you start looking at this idea, and the priority here is just to listen before talking, to make that more of the priority before trying to get my words out there, that I got my ears tuned in, my ears turned on. This one, though, this is one of those easier said than done. Am I right? Much easier said than done. What happens in those moments? Why is it so important? It's because the more you listen, the more you're going to know. The more you're going to listen, the more you're going to learn on the inside of your relationships. And this is one of those principles where we know it, and yet there's a gap that exists. You know why you don't listen? You know why you talk more than you listen? I'll tell you why I don't listen. Here it is. I don't listen because I know I'm right. It's the same reason that you don't listen. I can tune out what you have to say, what you need to say, what you are saying is not important to me because I already know the right answer. I already know the right solution. I've already predetermined in my mind and my heart what is right. And the sooner you come to realize that, the better off we're going to be. The sooner you come to realize that, the quicker we can take these gloves off. I'm not listening to you because I am right. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been, in the I'm right camp, and I'm looking at the person who's not in the I'm right camp, like you're in the you're wrong camp? Have you ever looked at that person and you thought, I have no clue why you think that way? I cannot for the life of me fathom why you behave that way. Why did you say that? Have you ever been there before? When we find ourselves in this position, listen, I'm in the spot where I'm not going to listen, and you're in the spot where you're wondering, like, why did they say that? What did they do? Why? If you've ever been in that spot before, there's something you should know. There's something you should know about me. And there's something you should know about everybody in this room, the person that you're sitting next to, the person that you got married to. Everything that comes out of their mouth, everything that they're doing, everything that they believe in their heart, it makes sense to them. It's right to them. Now you're on the other side and you're thinking, I don't know how in the world you could possibly see that. Let me give you all of my truth. Let me give you all of my facts and all of the reasons you should be convinced that I'm right and you're wrong. We sit on this side of the argument. We're loaded up. We're ready to throw down. I'm looking at you. You don't know what you're talking about. James says to us, be quick to listen and slow to speak, implying that if we would listen, we would begin to learn. So let me clue you in just a little bit. When you find yourself in a situation, you're in conflict with somebody else, and you can't figure out why they think, what they're doing, or why they believe what they are. Who in this situation has something to learn? This is not rhetorical. Help me. So when we're in this situation and I can't figure out where you're coming from, and I don't know why you're saying, what you're doing, or even why you believe it, yet I keep coming at you out of my frustration because we're not in agreement and we're loaded up, we're ready to roll, we're toe to toe. In that moment, James would say to me, be a little less quick to throw that jab. Won't you keep that hook restrained for just a little bit? Why don't you put yourself in the position, instead of trying to push agenda or to even push what you know to be right, why don't you put yourself in the position of listening, and then maybe you're going to learn something. When I find myself in the heat of the conflict, even when I'm convinced that I'm right, that's a very hard thing to be so stubborn, isn't it? What I have learned to put into place is if I can just slow down a little bit, if I can actually put James's words into action, that maybe it's hard for me to do. I'm loaded up. I'm ready to roll. That's my natural inclination. But if I could just slow down and begin to listen, what would happen as a result of that? A number of years ago, I read a book. It's very popular. Many of you have read it as well. It's an author, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In that book, he says this line. It's a quote: "Seek first to understand, then before seeking to be understood." Now, James said a lot here. I found this before I became a Christian, and this changed the way that I do relationships. What would happen if we would take James at his word, and somehow that we would begin to listen first before speaking, and I would begin to try to understand you and your positions and your reasons for your beliefs and the things you do and the things you say, instead of shoving it on you, pushing you back, bringing my arsenal of weapons? What would happen if I took this approach first? James tells us, every one of us, all of us, we should be quick to listen, and that we should be slow to speak and slow to become angry. And so when we're on the inside of these relationships, he says this, and he keeps going, and he's going to build out this. In verse 20, he gives us reasons why. He says, because human anger. Now he's contrasting here. Notice that he used the word human, not just anger in general, okay? So pay attention. Because human anger, it does not produce what? Human anger does not produce righteousness that God desires, right? Human anger, frustration, expectations going unmet, passions, desires going unfulfilled. My frustration moves up to a position of conflict and feuding and fighting. And he says that kind of human anger, it does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It does produce righteousness. Righteousness means in right standing. It does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It produces the rightness that I believe I'm entitled to. When I'm getting angry, when I'm upset with you, when I've not taking the moment to understand where you're at, something begins to grow on the inside of me. And it would not be the righteousness that God desires. And so let me give it to you this way. In every relationship, there are going to be 3 different agendas. And every time you're having conflict, every time you're toe-to-toe, you find yourself in the ring, you got the gloves strapped on, there are going to be 3 different agendas. Now, the first one is my agenda. That's the obvious one that we've been laying out. I want it to go my way, the way I've laid it out, the way I designed it to be. Then there's the other person's agenda, person I'm in conflict with, I'm fighting with. There's a third agenda here. And on the inside of my relationships, I can have my agenda. I can continue to try to prove that I'm right. I can continue to try to make my point. You can continue to try to make your point. Or there's God's agenda. Let me ask you a question. If you and I are in relationship and somehow we're arguing with each other, I'm not quick to listen. I'm not slow to speak. I've got some words that I've fired at you, that I've fired in relationship with you, and I fired them your way. If I win that argument, even if somehow I could figure out how to articulate myself and I've got my 3 points in a poem and I'm ready to deliver them and stand behind them with conviction, even if I could do that and I won the argument, but I lost the relationship, you can do and believe what you think is right, and it still be wrong. In this case, even if I am right, and I don't take James's approach, I'm wrong. I'm right in my conviction about what might be true, what the fact might be, but the way we approach it, I could be wrong. My agenda, another's agenda, or God's agenda. Think about this for a minute. Think about this relationship that God designed. Think about the intimacy that he made from the very beginning. He said, it's not good for Adam to be alone. Let me bring Eve. He created a helpmate. And from there, we see the family units. We see friendships. Our relationships, the closest ones, are there because we need them, because God has put them there. What is God's agenda for God's righteousness? It's outlined in so much of the New Testament. It's so much about what we talk about. It's the way that I serve others, the way that I love others. God's agenda is that I would be reconciled to my brother or my sister. God's agenda is never that my point to try and be right is right. No, it would actually put me in the place of being wrong. And so some of us today, we need to realize that we have two simple options. Here's your options. You can fight to be right, or you can fight for what is right. When you're in conflict with each other, you can try to make your point, and you might win the argument. You can fight to be right, or you can fight for the relationship to be in right standing. As you're inside of relationships, and this is why it's important, and I'll bring it together with this. I was thinking about this last night, and I'm practicing in the mirror with my kids' boxing gloves. Talk about feeling silly, right? So I was thinking about this last night, and like the boxing position, right? So you got a guard. If you're not familiar with a guard, you got a guard. It's how you protect yourself, right? When we enter in relationships that are feel like they're in the middle of the ring, and there's some punches that have been thrown, you know what happens? What should happen is you get your guard up here, right? What happens on the inside of our relationships when words are thrown, when they're used inappropriately, is the jabs are pushing people back. The hooks are catching people off guard. The uppercuts are knocking people off of their feet. And we find ourselves in this situation where our guards are up. Gloves up, guard up. And when that happens, when you're guarded, when you're protecting your heart because you don't know where this relationship is, you don't know when it's going to happen again. You don't know when the words are going to come out of their mouth again. You don't know when they're going to load up the hook again. A guard takes place. Now, God designing the intimacy of our relationship, it was without this. It was without the need for this. And so by weaponizing our words, by putting each other in the ring, by daring you to cross the line, come toe-to-toe with me, by using our words this way, Jesus would say, this isn't right. This should not be. Let me give you a final thought as I bring this together. Jesus, God's Son, sent to earth, models for us everything that we ever learn in Scripture. You can find Jesus modeling it. Let me show you where he's modeling this. Jesus was quick to listen and slow to speak. What do you mean, Pastor? When Jesus was born as a baby, God, creator of all, he comes and humbles himself into a position, a form that cannot speak, cannot talk, has no choice but to listen. We find through Scripture where Jesus doesn't perform miracles. We don't see him start his ministry until 30s. What was he doing all that time? When Jesus finally started talking, do you remember what they said? We've never heard a guy like this before. Speaks with such authority, with such clarity. It makes me wonder, why? How? And then I come to the conclusion, is because Jesus spent so much time listening so that he would understand humanity and speak straight into the moment, your heart, where you're at. The beautiful thing about our relationship with Jesus is he never gets in the ring. It's never throwing punches back. It's an invitation to come and to be embraced. The thing about Jesus is on the inside of this relationship that he listens, that he knows you, that he knows the things that are heavy on your heart, the things that have weighed you down, that have burdened you, that have beat you back, that have bruised you, that have left you bleeding. Jesus knows, he listens, he understands. And the great thing about Jesus is him being such a wonderful listener is just a prayer away. In just a moment, we're going to pray. We're going to talk to Jesus. And I want to pray for two different groups of people. I want to pray for the Christians, the believers on the inside of the room. I want to pray for you, those of you who are in relationship and you've thrown some punches. I want to pray for some of you who received some punches. They've hit you, they've landed, and you still felt the repercussions of them. But I also want to pray for a group of people. Maybe you're here today and like, hey, relationship with the others is the last thing, man. It's like my relationship with God is like, I'm the one throwing punches. What I just want you to know is Jesus is listening. He's very good at listening. And so today we're going to start with prayer. If you're far from God, you've pushed him away, you've thrown punches, you've jabbed, whatever that is, he's listening today. And it's an opportunity for you to talk to him right here. Father, today we're using our words. God, we're going to use them, and maybe in ways that we haven't used them in a while. God, and I just want to start by asking for forgiveness. Lord, the way that I've used my words as weapons in my life at times. God, would you help us? Would you help us to remember that our words are powerful? God, would you help us in these most important relationships that it's not important to be right, but to be in right standing. God, would you help us to humble ourselves, to put the needs of others above our own? God, when there's a gap in our expectation and the reality of what's happened, help us to be quick to listen, slow to speak. Father, I pray for my friends who are in the room today. Maybe there's one who feels like they're far from you, haven't talked to you in a while, and not sure you would be there if they started talking today. Let them know right now just how close you are and how much you are indeed listening. If that's you, you simply talk to the Lord. God, I'm sorry for the things I've done, the places that I've been. Help me to live differently. Help me to follow you. Simple prayer that way, a confession of faith by using our words. Jesus will remember that when we stand before him in judgment. Scripture we read today says. Thank you, Lord, for what you're doing here in our body. God, do the work on the inside of the relationships. Father, friends who have been fighting with each other, marriages that have been struggling, family members feuding. You are the God of reconciliation. Do what you can do. I thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen.